Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. I hope everybody's had a wonderful Friday so far. Today, we are going to go over our predictions for the first ever 12-team college football playoffs as college football officially begins tomorrow. I cannot wait for that. We'll also talk about the big news coming out of baseball with the Mariners firing manager Scott Servais last night during our show. Then we'll take a little bit of time to talk about the Browns, what they did this offseason, what we expect for them in the upcoming year, as well as finishing off our show with our famous Friday MLB Power Rankings. But before we get into all of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you are on YouTube, you can also use the super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, again, that message should pop up on the bottom of the screen. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, do me a favor, go and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I appreciate anything you guys do have to say. I appreciate you guys sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to start off our show today talking a little bit about the college football playoff. You see right here, we have our very first 12-team college football playoff. And I went through the trouble of putting together a little bracket here for you, but we've over this entire last week have been going over every single division, every single conference, at least power conference. Of course, there is the one Power 5 conference, so we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into how I got to my Power 5 pick, but this is what it looks like right now. Obviously, the first 4 seeds get a bye, and it's not 100% going to work out this way, but I did put the 4 power conference winners as the teams getting the bye. Now, if you look around here, there's a couple of teams that you may or may not be surprised are on here. We'll start off with the number 1 seed. The number 1 seed I have as Ohio State. When we talked about the Big Ten and the SEC really are those two conferences that are dueling it out for the supremacy. They are head and shoulders above conferences like the ACC, above conferences like the Big 12. But these are the two conferences that are kind of running things as it goes. And Ohio State, I think, has the most returning production as well as a major upgrade at quarterback. I think they are the team to watch out for. They get the number 1 seed. The number 2 seed goes to the Georgia Bulldogs, the team currently ranked as number 1 in the AP preseason poll. They're another team that has a lot of returning talent. Carson Beck is a Heisman favorite as it stands right now, currently ranked up on top of a lot of the quarterback leaderboards for where he might get drafted as it comes into the NFL season, the NFL draft next year. But this Georgia team is going to be great. They're always going to have a great defense. They have had a little bit of off-the-field issues as far as DUIs go and stuff. But if they can get that under control, they should be a great team. The 3 seed goes to the Miami Hurricanes. That's right. The U is back with football. It's been a long time. They're getting a lot of hype this year. A lot of hype is for winning their conference. And the ACC, I think, is going to be pretty tough. There's a lot of teams in here that in the ACC that I think could challenge for a playoff spot. As you see, there are 3 ACC teams in this bracket for me, but there's a couple of other ACC teams that I thought about putting in here, and we'll do some honorable mentions at the end as well. And the 4th conference winner, it's going to Utah. That defense is going to be staunch. They're getting their quarterback back. As long as they can stay healthy, they should be able to take care of business in the Big 12. As we go out to the non-power conference winners, sitting here at number 5, I have Oregon. I think they are the best team that isn't going to win a conference. I think they very easily could be in conversation with teams like Georgia, with teams like Ohio State at the top of the country as far as favorites to win the title go. Then the other team that's up there, finishing out the top 4 currently, at the 6th seed, we have the Texas Longhorns. They obviously still have Quinn Ewers, another guy that is favored to win the Heisman after leading Texas to the semifinals last season, falling just short in a very, very exciting game against Washington. But this should be a lot of fun. As we get to the 7 seed, I have the Florida State Seminoles. Again, they lost a little bit, but they're still an amazing team. They have plenty of talent returning. That is a culture with, lots of great recruiting coming out of it. This is a team that should be great this year. I just think they'll lose in their conference championship game. And at number 8, we have the Alabama Crimson Tide. They get a new coach. Nick Saban is no longer here. I still think they're going to be one of the best teams in the country. They have, obviously, that tradition there, that deep depth of players. A lot of people went away, a lot of players went away, but they still have that great tradition of recruiting all across the country. Kalen DeBoer, winning Coach of the Year, brought in plenty of great players to the transfer portal as well. They should be just fine. At 9, we have another SEC team, the Ole Miss Rebels. This is a team that has a lot of hype going into it this season, and for good reason. I think they could be the best team. They could be the dark horse out of the SEC. You take a look at outside of Georgia, a team that will look to surprise. You obviously have your top 2 favorites in Georgia and Texas, but Ole Miss is that next team on the list that I think could, if they get enough breaks, end up taking the conference. Getting to the double-digit seeds, we have Penn State sitting at 10. They're just going to be solid. Penn State is always a solid team. They always do their job. They always do what's asked of them. I don't know how far they'll go, but this is a team that should win about 10 games, just like they do every other season, and that should be enough to get them into the college football playoff. At 11, I have my big surprise. I put Louisville in there. I know I talked them up a lot. There's a lot of other teams that could take that slot, but I really believe in this Louisville Cardinal team. I think they did a great job in the transfer portal, especially in these last couple seasons, and I think this is the year that they take that big step, and I think they're going to be the surprise team for everyone. And getting to that 12 seed, this is where we have our our non-power conference representative. Currently, I have it in as Boise State. Obviously, Boise State is one of those bigger brands when it comes to the group of 5 schools. They went on that run all those years ago where they were up there in the nation. The other one that I've seen a lot predicted is Liberty. And I've talked about how I don't think Liberty is going to be a great team. They played a cupcake schedule last year. I don't think they're in it. There were a couple of other dark horses that I was thinking about putting in here that I ended up going against because Boise State, I think, is just the best group of 5 school right now. You look at a couple of teams from the Sun Belt, in App State especially, they're getting a lot of buzz, and JMU, James Madison, who has been ranked in the top 25 in each of their first 2 seasons as an FCS school. Now, they did lose their head coach. They lost a lot of talent, but looking at what they did this offseason, they still had their best recruiting class ever, and I think they have a real shot at stealing that spot as well. And the other one, Tulane, I've heard a lot about. That offense is going to be great. I'm a little worried about that defense. So out of those 4 or 5 top contenders, those are the guys that I'm looking at in the group of 5 to make a run at this 12 seed. Currently, I am giving it to Boise State, though. Obviously, they're recruiting their transfer portal class, bringing in former USC 5-star quarterback and not even starting him shows me how they feel about their team. Running through these matchups real quick. Starting with the 5-12, I just think Oregon is going to demolish, or whoever that 5 seed is going to demolish whatever group of 5 school comes in. That one shouldn't be much of a conversation. The 8-9 game between Ole Miss and Alabama, this just feels like kind of wrapping up the nice little tidy bow for Alabama. Obviously, they lost in the semis last year. I feel like getting tossed in the first round kind of puts a nice bow at the end of the true end to their dynasty. 7-10 matchup between Penn State and Florida State. I think that's the most boring matchup on this board, but this one could be really close. I'm giving this one to Florida State just because I don't think Penn State is the best team out of here. And then the final of the first four matchups, Texas takes on Louisville. Again, I don't think this will be very close. I think Louisville is going to be very good, but Texas is undoubtedly one of the best teams in the country. Then we get to our conference winners in their first game, and most of them should get through. I do think that Ohio State and Georgia should get through without much of an issue. The Texas-Miami game should be really close. I like Miami a lot, but I'm going to give the edge to Texas. And Oregon, I think, is a powerhouse. I think they're my third favorite to win this the entirety of the college football playoffs. So I'm moving them up over Utah. Then we get a rematch of the Big Ten title game between Ohio State and Oregon. I'm giving this to Ohio State again, although I was going back and forth on this. The third time they would be playing, it's gonna be interesting in this one. And then Georgia, Texas again, rematch of the SEC title game. I'm giving this one to Texas. It swaps out what it was before. And then Ohio State takes on Texas in the championship game. Texas falls just short yet again, and Ohio State and Ryan Day get their first national championship since 2014. Let me know what you think of this bracket, though. I'm very excited for college football. I can't wait for it to start tomorrow. All eyes on the biggest game of week 0, Florida State versus Georgia Tech. Very excited to see how Florida State comes out. But let me know what you think of this bracket. Any changes you would make? Anyone that I completely missed on? Any hot takes that I had that you disagreed with? Throw it in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to talk all about the manager change in Seattle. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just went over the first ever 12-team college football playoff predictions. You can go back and check those out. In this segment here, we are going to be talking a little bit about baseball. Obviously, the news broke while we were live yesterday, just about 24 hours ago on the dot, that the Mariners had officially let go of manager Scott Servais. We're going to do a deeper dive into what that means for the Mariners, for Scott Servais, and what it might look like as we get towards the end of this MLB season. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, in this segment here, we're going to move back into the world of baseball, getting into a little bit about the Mariners firing manager Scott Servais. Scott Servais has been the manager for the Mariners since 2015. He led the Mariners to their first playoff appearance in over 20 years, ending the longest playoff drought in the history, longest current playoff drought in American sports. It was getting up there. They made it just a few years ago, looking to build on success. Last season wasn't the same. They kind of collapsed near the end and weren't able to grab that wild card spot. And this year, it looked like they were ready to rebound. Last year was not what they wanted, but the offense just hasn't been able to keep up. The starting pitching for the Mariners has been one of, if not the best units in the entirety of Major League Baseball. But when you take a look at the bats, they're headliners. Julio Rodriguez, he was looked at to be a potential MVP candidate this year. He has fallen flat. He's started to heat up a little bit, but it has not been enough. They were up by 10 games in their division over the struggling Houston Astros on June 18th. They've fallen all the way back to 5.5 games out of the Astros. They're even further back in the wild card race, sitting at about 7 games out right now. They have an 11% chance to make the playoffs, and they just keep slipping. Currently sitting at 500, they have been one of the worst ball clubs since their decline really began. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is, because you can say the offense as a whole, but that doesn't explain why the offense disappeared. Because this was a team that, while they weren't blowing the world away with their offense last season or in 2021, at least had a consistent enough offense to be a playoff contender, to be a playoff team. Julio Rodriguez obviously not producing doesn't hurt, but it's not just him, it's the entire team. And firing Scott Servais about a month before the season ends is a tough move, but I think it's what they need. Do I think this is what's going to be able to push them to a playoff spot? I think they're honestly too far out at this point, and I think they wouldn't have made it either way. But lighting a fire under your guys, letting go of your manager, saying, hey, we need to make a change. We need to get something going. This cannot be the way that we finish out our season. It means something to these guys, right? These are guys that, from every report, seem to like their manager. He came in, his last conversation was, hey, let's turn it around. That's the last conversation he had with the clubhouse before he was let go. He's been with that team for a very, very long time, and he's a great manager. He should get another job he should get another chance somewhere else. But the failure with this team is going to hurt, because this is a really good team. It's hard to get 5 starters. Their 5th starter is Brian Wu, and he's been arguably a top 20 starter in the AL this season. That entire pitching staff has been insane. Now, the bullpen definitely has struggled. They even went out and bought at the deadline. That is a big part. It's not something that the Mariners usually do. They have been kind of staying even on the payroll, made a lot of interesting decisions in the last couple seasons to stay even on those payrolls, but it just has not been enough. It finally caught up to them. And it's a shame, because this is a Mariners team that's fun, young. They have one of the best, brightest young talents in the league in Julio Rodriguez, who just a couple seasons ago, as a rookie, won Rookie of the Year, signed his big contract, led the Mariners to the promised land, to the playoffs. They even won a playoff series, which is crazy. This is not something that the Mariners usually did. Again, they hadn't made it since that 2001 season before 2021. 20 years. They turn it around, and all of a sudden they can't do it. And it's unfortunate. That's just the life cycle of a team. I think this should light a fire under them. And I don't think it's going to be enough, but losing a key piece of the clubhouse is hopefully going to get them going. We'll see what happens. I think they're out of the playoffs now. Hopefully they don't just fade out forever, because this would be one of the worst one of the worst collapses in baseball. Over the course of 2 months, losing 18 games to a team that was really struggling. Now, the Astros are great, but the Mariners shouldn't be this far back. But anyway, let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your comments. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to get onto the NFL. We're going to start focusing our attention to the Cleveland Browns. Talk about their offseason, talk about their record prediction, everything that's going on with them this offseason. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube, absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the Mariners firing their manager, Scott Servais, after 9 years of service with the team, where he led them to the playoffs for the first time in 20 years, just 2 years ago. He is officially let go after one of the biggest collapses in MLB history. We also talked about in the first segment the predictions for the first ever 12-team college football playoffs. In this segment here, we're continuing our predictions for every single NFL team, including today, just 2 teams left to go. Talking about the Browns today, and we'll finish it up on Monday talking about the Steelers. But today, we're on the Browns. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you are on YouTube, you can also use the super chat feature to do the same thing. If you have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the chat, throw it in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. Like I was saying, we are going to get into the Cleveland Browns today. The Cleveland Browns are our second to last team to cover as we prepare for the NFL season. Just 13 days away, including today. Cannot wait for the beginning of the season. But the Browns are a team that is coming off an incredibly successful season for them, right? A season of ups and downs, a really weird season. They won a lot of awards as a team. They won Coach of the Year for Kevin Stefanski. Obviously, Myles Garrett wins Defensive Player of the Year. Joe Flacco wins Comeback Player of the Year. And they make the playoffs. They end up losing in the first round to rookie C.J. Stroud and the Texans, but they had arguably the best defense in the league, anchored by the best defensive player in the league. And they still have most of that back. They were very quiet this offseason. Most of that has to do with not having any draft picks or much capital to go out and sign guys due to the Deshaun Watson contract and Deshaun Watson trade. And he is going to be the main reason that they succeed or fail this season. In games where either him or Joe Flacco started last season, they were 9-2. They won 11 games last season, which means in games where Dorian Thompson-Robinson was starting, in games where Jeff Driscoll was starting, in games where anyone else that started games for the Cleveland Browns was starting, they only won 2 games. Not a very good way to look at it. 2-4. They weren't very successful in those games. Deshaun Watson had one successful half all season and was the last half of football that he played. So maybe he is back, but he got shoulder surgery on his throwing arm, so we don't know if he will be officially back to the way that he was playing back in Houston and in Clemson. And that's going to be the big question. We talk about their lack of moves, but they did make a couple. They re-signed they re-signed for the defense Zadarius Smith, a huge part of their pass rush, putting him opposite of Myles Garrett, again, keeping that defense together, as well as re-signing Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, or JOK, their star middle linebacker. That defense is still going to be good. Obviously, you talk about a defense led by Myles Garrett. You talk about a defense that has Zadarius Smith on the other side with the pass rush. They did lose a couple of pieces, though, but this is still a great defensive unit. You go to their corners. They have some of the best corners in the league in Greg Newsome and Denzel Ward, Grant Delpit and Juan Thornhill at safety. This is really, really good. Really, really good defense. Now, they ended up on a sour note getting blown out by the Texans, but this defense shouldn't be the reason why they don't win games. On the offensive end, they didn't do much. Again, it was a quiet offseason. They trade for Jerry Jeudy, who kind of disappointed, did not live up to his first-round pick potential in Denver. He's going to work as the wide receiver 2 here for Deshaun Watson behind Amari Cooper, whose contract they reshaped, got him a little bit more money. They still have Elijah Moore, a solid wide receiver 3, who they traded for last season, and Nick Chubb should be back. Now, like I said, there's a lot of weight on Deshaun Watson's shoulders, and there's a lot of weight on the running backs. If Nick Chubb can come back to where he was, this is a team that should be really good. They love to run the ball. That has been their identity forever, behind one of the best offensive lines in the league, an offensive line that they basically got everybody back from. They made a couple of picks in the draft. Again, their draft, not a very big one because they were giving out all their picks for Deshaun Watson. That is done now. They got their first pick, round 2 pick 45, where they drafted defensive tackle Mike Hall, and their only other pick in the top 150 was round 3 pick 85, guard Zach Zinter out of Michigan, and he should add some depth in case any of their offensive linemen go down. Again, not a very impactful draft, but there's not much you can do about that when you don't have a pick until 54 overall, right? This is not on the GM's draft this time. This goes back to some of the decisions they made trading for Deshaun Watson, which is why a lot of this falls on his shoulders. He is going to be the reason why they succeed. If we get Houston Deshaun Watson, if we get elite Deshaun Watson, this is a team that could very easily get the number 1 seed in the entire AFC. This is a team that paired with arguably the best defense in the league, arguably the best defensive player in the league, Myles Garrett, who's still favored to win DPOY for the second straight year. This is a team that could be incredible. Now, Deshaun Watson has been nothing if not inconsistent since joining the Browns. And maybe inconsistent is even unfair. He's been nothing if not bad, right? He has been one of the worst quarterbacks, overpaid, gave up a lot to get him as well. But there are flashes there, right? With him on the football field. There are flashes there, and if they can get Nick Chubb behind that offensive line, they still have Jerome Ford, who was serviceable when he was the lead rusher for them. They also, bring in Donta Foreman, who I think is really underrated as a back. I think he's one of those guys that everywhere he goes as a backup, he's put in meaningful snaps. With the Bears last season, filling in for injuries to their top backs, he was incredible. With the Panthers after Christian McCaffrey was traded away, he played incredibly meaningful football and was really, really good. Donta Foreman is a guy that if Nick Chubb can't do it, I think he might even overtake Jerome Ford. He is currently listed as 4th on the depth chart, so we don't know if he'll make the team, how that's going to go, but I think he's a very underrated player in the NFL. Constantly in those backup roles, showing what he can do. But this is a offseason where they didn't do much. Like I said, their big move, getting Jerry Jeudy, should really help that wide receiver core. That's a very talented wide receiver core now. Again, Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore. It's a solid front three. The defense is going to continue to be great. I'm going to give them a solid C. I don't think they made any kind of major changes, anything that needs to be praised. And that's just the situation they were in. The offseason didn't really mean too much to them, but they improved where they could and didn't try to do too much, which is very important for a team that was killed by injuries last year, especially at the quarterback position, but found a way to be successful. But anyway, let me know what you think of the Cleveland Browns offseason. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. When we come back, we're going to go over their schedule. All 18 weeks, all 17 games, go game by game and give you a prediction for what the Cleveland Browns will do in 2024-2025. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just went over the Browns offseason, a relatively quiet one. They weren't really able to do much due to the Deshaun Watson trade they made a couple of years ago. They're officially done paying that off, though. So if they're going to make a big splash next offseason, that is the time to do it. In this segment, we're going to finish our prediction of the Cleveland Browns, talk about their record, go game by game, go through every single week, see what we have them doing in 2024. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, in this segment here, we are going to get into the Cleveland Browns schedule. Go over every single week that they have. They have an interesting schedule, right? The Browns are a team that won 11 games last year, earning them a playoff spot and second in their division. Now, we've talked about how it's kind of a mixed bag. The teams that they play out of division, I'd classify 3 of the 8 of them as good, 5 of them as bad. So it's about as even as you can get when it comes to playing the outside divisions. Again, the divisions that they take on are the AFC West and the NFC East. So a couple of easy games, a couple of hard games to even out the schedule. But this is a Browns team that needs to get its offense going. I'm not worried about a defense, and you get into a defensive battle, the Browns are going to be able to keep up with just about anything you throw out there. They currently have one of the better bye week slots. I know I talk about this a lot, but a week 10 bye is a really, really good spot to be in. You're not going to be, if you're too beat up beforehand, bye in the middle is a nice spot to be, and it prepares you for the end run, as well as, giving you time to rest up pretty evenly throughout the season. It's about as even as you can possibly get. They open up their season at home against the Cowboys. This should be a fun game. I'm curious how the Cowboys are going to come out. There's been a lot of really good stuff coming out about their offensive line, specifically Tyler Guyton, and he looked pretty good in the preseason against Max Crosby, one of the biggest rivals, I'll say, for Myles Garrett at repeating at the Defensive Player of the Year. If he held up against him, it's obviously not the same, and it's preseason, but this Cowboys offensive line could be back, and that could really hurt a pass rushing unit and Myles Garrett. That's going to be the main force behind their success this season. I'm giving this one to the Cowboys to start off the year. Then they head down to Jacksonville. And again, that offensive line is a mess. The Browns should pretty easily win this game. I won't say easily because we don't know what that offense is going to be like. But I do believe Nick Chubb will be able to come back and hold his own. Maybe not to the same extent as before, but the Browns start off 1-1. Then they head back home, take on the New York Giants. They should demolish them in this game. The Giants are not going to be a very good football team, and we talk about offensive line disasters. Outside of Andrew Thomas, there's not much of a selling point on that line. Maybe Evan Neal takes a step up, but the Browns improve to 2-1. Then they go on the road to take on Max Crosby and the Raiders. This should be a fun defensive game. I'm going to give this one to the Raiders, though. I feel like the Gardner Minshew mentality might push them over the top here. Then they head over to Washington, a cross-country flight for them, heading to the Commanders in D.C. They should be able to win this game as well. Jaden Daniels going up against that defense. I'm not sure how that's going to go. Then they get another NFC East matchup, this time as well on the road, getting rid of the entire NFC East in the first couple of weeks, taking on the Eagles in Philadelphia. A tough matchup to go and play, especially in Philly. I think they should be able to win this game, although this one also will be a tight one. So through 6 weeks, they've taken on all 4 NFC East opponents, as well as going 4-2. A pretty good start to their season. Then they get their first division match of the season, taking on the Cincinnati Bengals at home in Week 7. I'm giving this one to the Browns as well. The Cincinnati offensive line needs some work, and I think the Browns should be able to take advantage of that. Then they get another division game, back-to-back division games against 2 really good teams, this time against the Baltimore Ravens. I think the Browns win this game as well. They're on a roll so far early in the season. Then they get the Chargers, Week 9, right before their bye. And as good as I think the Chargers are going to be, I think the Browns are kind of built to stop a Jim Harbaugh team. Against the run and even against the pass, that corner duo is really good. So heading into their bye week in Week 10, they sit at a really, really solid 7-2. Now, this is a tough AFC to win a playoff spot in. You're probably going to need 10 wins to get to the playoffs. So down the stretch against, a definitely tougher schedule for them. You have to go up against a bunch in the last 7 weeks of the season. They have to play almost all of their weeks against playoff teams from last season. 5 of their 7 games come against former playoff teams, and one of those teams that didn't make the playoffs last year was the Cincinnati Bengals. So that is a lot of really, really tough games down the stretch. We'll see if they can get to that 10-win threshold, try and make the playoffs. Coming off the bye, they take on the Saints. This is by far, in my opinion at least, the easiest game of their post-bye week schedule. They take on the Saints on the road, which isn't necessarily going to be an easy game, but I do think they take care of business off of a bye. That is a 6-game win streak for the Browns as they improve to 8-2 on the year. Then they get their first game of the season against the Steelers. This one at home. Another defensive player of the year candidate they have to go up against, this time at TJ Watt. I have them losing this one. The Steelers and the Browns always play close. This should be a fun game, but I think the Steelers will take care of business. So that's their first loss in 6 weeks. It's a crazy run for them. Then they get the Broncos, I take back what I said about the Saints being the hardest game. I completely overlooked the Broncos. Apologize, but I think the Broncos will be able to give them a little bit of a fight, though. I think the Broncos are a team that if you underestimate them and you just look past them, could give you some trouble. And because of that, I think the Broncos win this game. Their offensive line isn't half bad, and I think the Broncos take a win at home. Then they get the Steelers once again, and this is going to be another tight game. I'm giving this one to the Steelers as well. So coming off of a 6-game winning streak, they lose 3 in a row. They fall now to 8-5 on the year. Coming down the stretch, playing against 4 of the top teams in all of the AFC, the Chiefs, the Bengals, the Dolphins, and the Ravens, 2 of those divisional matchups. That is going to be a tough stretch. But it starts off good. Taking on the Chiefs at home, a really, really tough matchup. Of course, anytime you have to play Patrick Mahomes, but I think the Chiefs. I don't think the Chiefs will be able to win this one. I don't think they'll be able to pull this one out. The Chiefs are not undefeatable. They're a team that can lose, and the Browns, I think, have a defense that can give them fits. So I think the Chiefs lose this game. Then they get the Bengals on the road, and division games are always tough. Every single time, they are incredibly tough. The Bengals, I have winning this game as they fall to 9-6 with 2 games to go. Then they get the Dolphins at home in the midst of the toughest stretch of football that any team has to go through for the Miami Dolphins. I think the Browns will be able to beat them here. The Dolphins are reeling. The Browns need a win bad. They take this one and improve to 10-6 on the year. This is a game that if they win, they're in. Week 18 against the Ravens. This is a big game for the Ravens as well. If they win this, they get the number 1 overall seed in the AFC. This is a very important game for all parties. I expect the teams to go all out. This might even be the Sunday night game, although I doubt it if everything I have goes projected. I have the Ravens winning this one. This one is in Baltimore, and I think that's the deciding factor there. These are the 2 teams with arguably the best defense in the league last season. These 2 teams match up very well against each other, but Lamar Jackson should be able to do his thing, especially in front of a home crowd in Week 18, and the Browns fall to 10-7 on the year. Either way, they beat that Vegas threshold for them, which is 8.5 wins. I think they get past that pretty easily. I think that's one of the most incorrect lines in all of football this season, actually. But the Browns are a very good team. Sitting at 10-7, they have to go to tiebreakers with the Indianapolis Colts to make the playoffs. Like I said, you need 10 wins to make the playoffs, and this would be a tiebreaker for the 7 seed. Looking at it right now, I gave the tiebreaker to the Colts. They didn't have any head-to-head battles, but looking at matchups against the AFC, I believe the Colts have the edge, and I think that's the next tiebreaker when you get away from head-to-head matchup. So the Browns are the first team out of the playoffs. They just miss it. This does not mean they're a bad team, and the tiebreaker could go the other way. I could have counted it wrong, but this is a Browns team that still has one of the best defenses in the league. I think they only get to 10-7 if Nick Chubb does his thing. He doesn't have to be all the way back, but at least most of the way back. And Deshaun Watson performs averagely. I don't think he'll be back to that elite form that we saw him early on in his career when he first exploded onto the scene, but I do think he will be able to perform at a slightly above average level, and that should be where the Browns are hoping. Hope for future seasons, and that's all they need to look for right now. This is a team that very easily could get into the playoffs. Again, if Deshaun Watson really takes that step up, this is a team I could easily see going 14-3 even. Wins against the Steelers at least once, beating the Broncos, beating the Raiders. That's 3 or 4 wins right there that I don't have counted for them that could bump them all the way up to 13 or 14 wins. So this is a really good Browns team, but I do have them falling just slightly outside of the playoffs. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Cleveland Browns season. If you think I'm way off on what they're doing, let me know. But we're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to finish off our show with our Friday MLB Power Rankings. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over everything Cleveland Browns from their offseason to a record prediction for this year. We also talked about the Mariners moving on from manager Scott Servais after 9 years with the team, taking them to the playoffs for the first time in 20 seasons back in 2021. We also started off the show talking about our predictions for the 12-team college football playoff. College football, of course, starts tomorrow. I could not be more excited for it, but we are going to finish off our show with a Sports by GSMC Podcast Network classic, the Friday MLB Power Rankings, taking you around the world of baseball, giving a bird's eye view at what every team has been doing in the last week or so, and giving you those updates. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, in this segment here, we are going to get into the MLB Power Rankings. It has been 1 week since we last took a little dive around the world of baseball, and a lot has happened. It has been quite a while, but you see there's changes all up and down this board. Starting off, as we usually do, at number 30. The White Sox hold their crown as the worst team in baseball. They are the first team to officially be eliminated from the playoffs, the only team to officially be eliminated from the playoffs. They sit loud and proud at number 30. At 29, we have the Miami Marlins, still the epitome of bad, sitting there just below the Rockies, both of those teams who have been abysmal all season long. The Angels drop 1 spot to number 27. They're 2-8 in their last 10, and there's not too much going for them just about now. They did call up Johnny Cueto, making his first start in a long time earlier this week. So, old veteran, he's been pitching forever. It's fun to get a name like that back in the league. At 26, we have the Oakland Athletics, soon to be no longer Oakland Athletics. They are up a spot from 27. They've been surprisingly good for the Oakland Athletics over the last week or so. They're 6-4 in their last 10 as they continue to just be slightly above the bottom tier of teams. Same thing can be said about the Washington Nationals. They fall 1 spot to 25. They've been bad, but their young stars of the future are starting to come up. James Wood has been awesome. So much fun to watch. News broke today that Dylan Cruz, the second overall pick in the draft last year, will be up on Monday when they take on the Yankees and Juan Soto returns to DC for the first time as a Yankee. That should be a lot of fun. Very exciting times here in DC. The Blue Jays fall a spot as well. They continue to struggle. Fun fact about them, in their game against the Red Sox coming up, Danny Jansen will be the first player in the history of baseball to have officially played for both teams in the same game, as he was traded after in a game earlier after a game was suspended, made up, and he will officially be playing for both teams. So that's a lot of fun. I believe that's tonight, though. So fun little history note being made. The Tigers up 2 spots to 23. They've been really good recently. They have AL Cy Young favorite Tariq Skubal on the mound, and that is the big bright spot. They should be pretty good as the season continues. At 22, we have the Pirates. They're down 2 spots from where they were last week. I was remiss. I forgot to mention last week they were on a 10-game losing streak. That all but tanked their playoff chances. They continue to be a little bit better than losing 10 in a row, but they still have not been great. They fall 2 spots to 22. The reigning World Series champions, the Texas Rangers, sit nice and comfortably at spot 21, down 2 spots from where they were before. They just have not been the same, whether it be injuries or a World Series hangover. They have not been good all season long. At 20, we have the Reds. They're up a spot, not because of anything they did, although they did go on a bit of a run in the last 2 weeks, but because the Rangers and the Pirates have just been worse. The Rays fall 1 spot to number 19. They are not out of the playoff race. Don't look now, but if the Rays get hot, they're just within range to potentially have some Rays magic and sneak into that final wild card spot in the AL. The Cubs at 18 are up 4 spots. They're just above the Reds here. They're just barely hanging on to NL wildcard contention. This is what everyone in this tier is at, from the Reds to the Reds to the Mariners. Really, are these teams that are barely holding on to these wildcard spots. If they get hot and the right team gets cold, they might be able to get in. Cardinals fall a spot to 17. They seem like they had a playoff spot locked up. Unfortunately, their age caught up to them. Their starting pitching kind of fell down a cliff, and they reverted back to where they were at the beginning of the season. The Giants are up a spot to 16, as they are the team outside of the Mets that has the best chance to make that third wild card spot a game in the NL. The Mariners, we talked a lot about them. They obviously fire their manager. They're on a bit of a skid, in danger of falling below 500 for the first time in forever this season. They dropped 3 spots to 15. The Red Sox are at 14, and this is where we really get into contention for wild card spots, but you're not in there. That tier that includes the Red Sox and the Mets. Both of those teams are just outside of that third wild card spot. The Red Sox move up 1 spot to 14, and the Mets stay put at 13. At 12, the Braves have figured it out, seemingly. The offense still hasn't been up to snuff, but they're back in a wild card spot pretty comfortably, holding on to that third wild card spot just ahead of the Mets and the Giants. The Twins and the Royals probably should be tied for 10 here, but we don't do ties here. The Twins drop 2 spots. The Royals go up 1. They are basically at the same. They have the same record. They're both in the wild card. They're in wild card 2 and 3 right now, behind the Orioles. These two teams have both won, have both been really good over their last 10, just refused to give ground, are only 2 games back of their division lead. So that AL Central is coming down to the wire. At 9, we have the Astros, the team that has basically killed the Mariners. They just continue to win games, slowly and surely building their lead over the Mariners as they go up to 9th place. At 8th, we have the Brewers, and they have been really, really good. I really wanted to move them up into the top 5, but I can't put them over every team ahead of them. That's how good these top 7 have been all season, and especially after the All-Star break, especially after the All-Star break applies to the Diamondbacks and the Padres, both of which have been the hottest teams coming out of the break. They have secured their playoff spots all but with their performances coming out of the break. Both of them have been incredibly hot. The Padres currently sit half a game back of the Diamondbacks, which is why they're at 7 and the Diamondbacks are at 6, but both of these teams have been so much fun to watch. The Orioles at number 5 fall 2 spots. They've been struggling a little bit lately. We didn't get the best out of them in this last week. They got walked off a couple times by the Mets. Stings, but they're still a really good team. At 4, we have the Phillies. They're up a spot from 5 last week. Again, a really, really good team. Every team in this top 10, really every team in this top 11, I think are, you know what? I'll extend it all the way to 12 for you guys. Everyone in the top 12 here is really, really good this year. At 3, we have the Guardians. They're up a spot. They've been a little streaky. I'm starting to get a little concerned about them, but they're going to hold steady in the top 3 here. They have too much talent. That bullpen is elite and electric to watch. They hold at number 3. The Yankees stay at number 2. The combination of Aaron Judge hitting his 300th home run, Juan Soto hitting a career-high 36 home runs, Aaron Judge chasing history, trying to break his own record once again. He's just 2 home runs off that pace, and the Nats like to give up home runs, so we'll see what happens in this series. And finally, at number 1, holding on to that spot for a second straight week, the Dodgers, who currently have the best record in baseball. Not by much, though. This is a tight race down the finish. There's not one true team that's running away with anything, and that means we're being set up for one of the best finishes to the MLB season. A super exciting MLB postseason is around the corner. I can feel it in my bones. I cannot wait. But let me know, is there anything that I got drastically wrong? Anything you completely disagree with that I should be personally held accountable for? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on all of this. I hope everybody has a great weekend. We are going to be back on Monday talking about week 0 of the college football playoffs here today that happened over the weekend. I will see you then. I hope everybody has a great weekend. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Hope you enjoyed. Have a good one. Bye-bye.